Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Celeste Holbrook. This is the What to Say About Your Kids, What to Say to Your Kids About Sex Masterclass. I'm so excited that you're joining me. I'm really excited about this masterclass today because, talking to your sex is a really intimidating thing. And lots of people have questions about what to say and when to say it and how to say it. And what all is involved in the conversation surrounding sex, because we want to say the right things, but not too much, but not too little. And we want our kids to be sexually healthy, but we're not exactly sure how to get there. So I'm really excited about this masterclass. And I wanted to provide something that was very relevant for you and very timely as far as if you have kids who are newborn or 3 years old or 10 years old, you will be able to gain something from this class. So again, my name is Dr. Celeste Holbrook. This is a masterclass called What to Say to Your Kids About Sex. And we're just going to spend, about 30 to 40 minutes talking about this conversation that we're to be having with our kids about what sex is, how it works, what sex isn't, and, how to present sex in a way that establishes our family values, as well as our desire for them to experience sex in a healthy way as the time approaches. And in a time frame that works for them. So, it's a very important subject, something that I get asked as a sexologist just so often. And so I'm really excited that we're going to be sharing this today. I'm going to give just maybe one more minute, see if anybody else can jump on. And until then, I'm going to talk about this masterclass today, the things that we're talking about, the conversations that you're going to be having with your kids regarding sex. What is it? How is it done? When is it supposed to be done? How babies are made, where do they come from? And how to have a healthy conversation surrounding sex. So, this is a really important topic, something that a lot of parents ask me, and I think that it's something that we often feel a bit intimidated, maybe is the right word, intimidated to do. So, it's one of those things that I think really needs to be talked about and really is an important part of your kids' development and an important part of who they are as kids and who they will become as adults. So I'm so glad you're here because you're making it a priority. You're making the sex conversation something that you care about and something that will ultimately help your kids make sexually healthy decisions as they become adults. So I think we will go ahead and get started. If you are interested in asking a question, please feel free to use the chat feature if you're on Google Hangout, or you can just simply email me. My email address is celesteholbrook@gmail.com. I'll be checking my emails throughout the masterclass just to make sure I don't miss anything. I certainly want this to be a conversation versus just a presentation, because I really want to make sure I meet your needs. And I want to make sure that you get the questions answered that you need answered. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature if you're on Google Hangout. And if you are not on Google Hangout, if you're joining us via YouTube, please feel free to email me at celesteholbrook@gmail.com. And I will be checking my email every so often to make sure I get everybody's questions. So, what in the world are we going to say to our kids about sex? When is the right time to talk about sex And what things should we say? That's what we're talking about today. And I'm so glad that you're joining me because this is a really, really important topic. Just a little bit about who I am. My name is Celeste Holbrook. I have a PhD in health education with an emphasis in sexuality. I work with men, women, and couples to help them achieve their best sex life. And my mission in life is to provide safe spaces for people to talk about sex. It's my absolute heart work. It's what I love to do. And I'm so glad that you're joining me because it tells me that this is your work too. You want to be part of that process of providing safe spaces to talk about sex. So I'm so glad you're joining me. So let's move quite along so you can get the value and the information that you need. The interesting thing about today is that we really want to talk about what the sex conversation is really about. Is it really just about, what happens during sex? I think it's more. The other things we're going to do today is discuss what the most important part of a sex conversation is with your child. We're going to spend a good amount of time talking about what to say at what ages. And then at the end, I'm going to give you an opportunity to learn more through some of my parenting classes. So to start out, what is a sex conversation with your kids really about? I'm going to tell you. It's about you. This is a great quote from Charles Raisin. He's a professor out of the University of Arizona, and he works with parents on how to raise the healthiest children possible in their sex lives and otherwise. But he says one generation of deeply loving parents would change the brain of the next generation, and with that, change the world. So when we're having these conversations, it really is about you. It's about the way in which you see sex, the way in which you see relationships, the filter through which you look at these things. So, when people ask me, what should I tell my kids about sex? I often revert back to them. Well, what is the message that you want to send? What is it that you want them to know about sex? What is your hope for them? And discovering what your hope for your kids is has a lot to do with what you hope for yourself, how you feel about sex, because we all have a way in which we see sex. We all have a way in which we view sex, and that is determined by how we grew up, how we experienced how we had our first sex experience, what our parents told us, what the media told us, and the ideas and beliefs that we have come about just through living. So really, when we think about what we want to talk to our kids about, it has a lot to do with how you feel about the topic. What do you feel about sex? When do you feel like sex should happen? And do you feel like sex is a good thing? Do you feel like sex is an honorable thing? Do you feel like sex is a dirty thing? Do you feel like sex is pleasurable or not pleasurable? Do you feel like sex is a responsibility? These are all things that are filters through which you view sex, and will either influence the way that you talk to your kids or influence the way you choose not to talk to your kids about sex. So it's really important to understand how we as parents actually view sex before we can have healthy conversations about sex with our kids. So a little bit of self-exploration is very helpful in figuring out how and what the messages will be about sex. What do you want those messages to be? How do you view sex? What do you want for your children? We're going to spend a tiny bit of time talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because this is the theory with which I base my work as a sexologist. So you might think back to, Psychology 101 or any kind of basic biology, psychology class that you've ever done. And you will see you will remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory in which we base what we think that what the human needs to survive, and then what the human needs to thrive. So as you go up the pyramid, you will see what a human needs to, at the very basic level, survive, and then in the middle levels, a mix of surviving and thriving, and at the top levels, to really, live a very enriched life. So the very basic bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is psychological needs. So these are things like air, water, food, the very, very basic things you need just to be able to live on this earth. So if you go up one rung, you have things that are just above those psychological needs. Or physiological needs. You have things like safety, shelter, safety from the elements, clothes, covering, feeling safe in your environment so you don't feel like, somebody's going to hurt you. Those are the basic kind of safety needs. And then as you go up, you have things like love and belonging, feeling like you're part of a community, feeling like you have family, feeling like you are in part of a group, even if it's a group of two, that you have relationships that derive meaning. Above that, in the green line, you have esteem. So feeling like you are worthy, you have value, you contribute to society, you contribute to the community. And the very top, you have what we call self-actualization in the psychology world. And that is understanding that you are in charge of your own actions. You are in charge of your own choices. You are the one that makes things happen, or doesn't make things happen. So you are in charge of your happiness. You are in charge of your destiny, things like that. So that's self-actualization. So that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs as it relates to how Maslow intended it. Well, I, in my work as a sexologist, have taken Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I have put a filter of sex and sexuality over it. So if you think about this hierarchy of needs through the lens of sex and sexuality, it's kind of easy to see where our conversations with our kids are going. And you might be thinking, like, Celeste, this sounds like crazy talk. Well, let me try and explain it a little bit before we move on to, how to have those conversations and at what point to have those conversations with your kids. So if we layer sex over this pyramid, at the very bottom, you have, one second. At the very bottom, you have psychological needs. So things like, in the physical world, things like food, air, water. But in the sexual world, it would be physically reproducing. So, sperm meets egg. That's the physiological need that a society would have in order to, reproduce and make more species. So that's the basic part of sex. Above that would be safety. So things like consent, consensual sex. So we have reproduction and safety and consent. So, making sure that you are protecting yourself against STIs, and making sure that you are engaging in consensual sex. Those are the two bottom rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, interestingly, and what I find fascinating in my work is that we really don't talk about sex above these bottom two rungs, which is fascinating to me. When we're talking to our kids about sex, if we even do that at all, we tend to stay on the very bottom. So we talk about, how sex works, which is, very important, absolutely, but it's not the only thing we need to talk about. And we talk about how to have consensual sex or safe sex, or how to remain safe, prevent pregnancy or prevent STIs. But there is so much more above the ladder when we think about sex. There is things like love and belonging and a sense of attachment to other people. things like esteem, that you are valued for your sexuality, that you are valued for who you are as a female or as a male. And then at the very top would be things like self-actualization. And when we put the lens of sex over that, that would be things like enjoyment and pleasure and connection and all of those things that we really don't have conversations about, because all of our conversations revolve around, how sex works and, make sure it's safe or done at the right time or with the right person. So all of those things are important. The basics are very important. We're going to talk today a lot about the basics of sex and why it's important. But remember that there are other conversations around sex that we should be having with our kids that are just as important. Things like, pleasure, and things like connection and esteem and intimacy. All those things surrounding sex are also just as important as the physiological needs. Okay, now that we've reviewed Maslow's hierarchy of needs, let's move on just a fraction to talk about the things that we want to present to our kids. Just a quick pause here. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to use the chat feature if you are on Google Hangout, or you can email me at celesteholbrook@gmail.com. Okay, what are the benefits of talking to your kids about sex? Because all of you that are joining me obviously know that this is important. You are taking action to, create a world, a relationship with your kid that makes this an important part of your teaching as a parent. So I know all of you are very aware that there are benefits to talking to your kids about sex, but what really are they? Well, in my opinion, this is one of the greatest things that you can do for your child, because if you can help your child understand the intricacies and the goodness and the connection and the intimacy that they can derive from a sex life, you are vastly helping them in their relationships in their future. The second thing is, and I think probably the key to this whole conversation, to this whole relationship with your kid, one of the keys is that when you talk to your kid about sex, and when you are the person that knows the information about sex, because when you talk to your kid about sex, you establish yourself as the authority about sex. When you do that, you are opening the door for your child to always come to you when they have questions about sex. And if you hear nothing else from this masterclass, remember that when you have conversations with your kids about sex, you are establishing yourself as the authority, the one that they should go to when they have questions, concerns, or problems about sex in the future. And that right there is worth all the uncomfortableness of talking about sex. That right there is golden. If you can establish yourself as the authority, because listen, there are tons of other ways that a kid can establish authority about sex. He might, if he's not getting a conversation, he or she might think that the media is the authority on sex, and that's the way sex should look like, and that's the way sex should be done. So they are going to get messages about sex. But if you can make your message the most important one, they will come to you with questions and concerns later on in life. And that right there is the most important thing about talking to your kids about sex. Okay, so let's start with ages and topics. People ask me all the time, when should I have the birds and the bees talk with my child about sex? Well, I think that you should not make it just a talk. I think it should be a dialogue, a conversation that starts very young and continues out into adulthood. This conversation about relationships and intimacy is not just a single isolated event. It's something that should happen over the course of time and develop and flourish and mature over the course of time, just like your kid is maturing. So we're going to start at between ages 2 and 3. Now, I have ages written down here for each of these topics. But again, remember, your kid is going to be different than any other kid. So what your kid needs to know at 9 or 10, maybe another kid will do better to know at 8. And it's just going to be your choice on what is appropriate for your child's maturity level at what point. Or it may revolve around the environment. You know, something came up or they accidentally saw something on TV and you need to have a conversation earlier than you had assumed you would have to have that conversation. But, you know, it's a good, you know, using those things as a good platform for having a conversation, a good kind of jumping off point, or maybe a push, if you will, for having those conversations. So here we're going to start at age 2 to 3. I don't think there's anything that you need to talk about before the ages of 2 necessarily. But we'll start, you know, at around toddler age, 2 to 3, and that's determining the right terms for their body parts. I like to encourage parents to be a little bit more descriptive than just, you know, penis and vagina. I like to have parents use penis, testicles, vagina, and vulva. And the reason is that if something were to happen with them, or if they needed to describe some pain to you, or describe, hopefully, you know, this never happens, but describe, you know, that somebody was touching them inappropriately, you would want to make sure that they have the right descriptive terms. So, you know, penis and testicles are 2 separate parts of their body, just like, you know, finger and palm. So it's nice for them to have that power to use those terms independently of each other. And then vagina and vulva, you know, most of the time when a little girl is talking about herself, she's really talking about her vulva. You know, something hurts on her vulva, which is the area outside of the vagina. The vagina is actually the internal organ. So, you know, talking about the vulva, and that might be even a little bit more comfortable for you as a parent to talk about, you know, what hurts on her vulva, or we're going to clean your vulva, or make sure you wipe your vulva. Those might be a little bit easier terms even than to always say vagina, because they're fairly different. And a kid can tell the difference and can know the difference, learn the difference. And this will just, you know, help you later on if something were to come up, or if they're having pain in a certain area, to help be more descriptive. So at ages 2 and 3, I encourage parents to use the correct terms for body parts. And will this mean there might be a time at church or in public where you're slightly embarrassed because your kid grabs his penis and he says, "My penis is full, I need to go to the bathroom"? Yes, that may happen to you. And I guess I'll apologize for that happening since I gave you this piece of information, or this encouragement to, you know, use the correct body terms for your kiddo. But I think in the long run, it's the right thing to do. And it just helps bring less confusion to your child. So, you know, if you name your kid's body parts wee wee, or tata, or vajayjay, or muffin, or, you know, all those kind of cartoon terms or limited terms, you are going to have to teach the real terms eventually anyway. So I think it just sends kind of a confusing message to a kid to learn the inappropriate terms first, and then, you know, the actual terms later. And it doesn't establish a sense of trust in you that you are telling them the right thing. So I encourage parents to use the right terms. If this is uncomfortable for you, I understand that. And if you want to use other terms, that's okay too. Your kid's not going to be, you know, scarred for life by any means. But that's my recommendation for ages 2 and 3. And really, that's it. You know, I don't think you need to have any more conversations other than the correct body parts. All right, ages 3 and 4. So at this age, you can have that conversation about where a baby comes from. And this often becomes an organic conversation because mom is pregnant again. And so, you know, it's a very simple conversation. Mommy has a uterus. Again, I like to use the appropriate anatomical terms. Mommy has a uterus, and you live there until you were born. Easy peasy. You can be simple. There's no need to, do any more detailed logic than that. Mommy has a uterus. That's where you lived till you were born. And, usually this is enough for a 3 to 4-year-old. Sometimes they have more questions, in which case you might need to have a little bit more discussion about it. And that's okay too. Like I said, these ages are kind of just a guide to when things usually happen and conversations that normally would take place during that time in a kid's life. But, sometimes that happens later on and or earlier on, and that's okay too. So the important part here is to keep the explanation simple. Talking about how a baby grows in your belly for a child, because they don't have those uncomfortable emotions attached to it. For a child, talking about where a baby comes from is like talking about how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. The emotion level for a child is the same, but we're the ones who, can sometimes make it feel uncomfortable. And I will tell you, if you are uncomfortable about talking about these things, guess what? You are totally normal. If talking to even a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old about your pregnancy gets you a little bit uncomfortable, you're normal. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. There's, nothing bad about feeling uncomfortable about these conversations. That's okay. That's okay. You are just, the common parent. I am uncomfortable talking about, sex things to my kids. And I talk about sex every day, all day. I do it for a living. That's how I make my living. So you know what? It's okay. It's okay if you're uncomfortable, just push through and do it anyway. Just like you're uncomfortable when you have to discipline your kids and you're uncomfortable when you have to make hard choices, but you do it anyway because it's the right thing for the kiddo. So I just want you to know that you are okay. If you are common, you are normal if you feel uncomfortable having these conversations. All right. So by age 4 or 5, your kiddo might be asking how babies are born. Again, if you are pregnant at this time or have gotten pregnant after you have a second child or third child, the questions might be, how babies are born. And that's a great, you can explain that to a 4 or 5-year-old. They can absolutely get that, especially if you have been using, anatomically correct terms and they are very comfortable with talking about their vagina or their penis or their testicles. All of those things can help set the platform for you having an easier discussion for them as they turn 4 and 5. So literally how babies are born might come up between ages 4 and 5. And my encouragement to you is literally tell them how babies are born. The actual process of, mommy has a baby in her belly and it grew there for 8 months, 9 months. And when it was time for him or her to be born, she got squeezed out through mama's vagina. And, that's all you have to say. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. If you want to talk about C-sections, that's great too. So it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. That's exactly how they're born. And if there are follow-up questions, try and be as literal and simple and straightforward as possible. And if you have to repeat it, that's okay too. Because it's kind of a hard concept sometimes for the kiddos, but it's also kind of an interesting concept for them. So you might have to say the same thing several times over, which for those of us who have 4 and 5-year-olds know that's about every topic you have to talk about 4 or 5 times over. So, but I wouldn't go farther than that. That's how they're born. That's how they get out of mama's belly. And again, our kiddos don't put the emotional tie onto it. For them, this process is the same as emotionally the same as, how, rain is made or why trees are brown, so that's the same emotional level that they are on. So, you can think about that. Even though we are emotionally tied up because we know it involves sex, they are not so emotionally tied up. Okay. Again, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat feature if you are joining us via Google Hangout, or you can use, my email address, which is celesteholbrook@gmail.com. Happy to answer any questions you may come up with. All right, moving on to ages 5 and 6. Ages 5 and 6. So at this point, my suggestion is, and they may already be asking, general idea of how babies are made, and you can talk about it in a way that feels comfortable to you. Here are some suggestions, and you can use this verbatim, or you can come up with something that works for you. But my recommendation for you is that you're direct in what happens. So some ideas might be, mom and dad made you, and if for a little more detailed detail, you can say a tiny cell inside dad called a sperm met with a tiny cell inside mom called an egg, and that's how you began. And then you can repeat the things that you've already had a conversation about, like how you grew in mom's uterus and came out through her vagina. So I know this is kind of feels like the big talk, but really you're going to have more conversation as your child grows about the bigger issues surrounding sex, love and esteem and connection and intimacy. So these are just the basics. This is just the physiological things that happen. It's up to you whether you want to involve emotions and feelings at this point. Do you want to say, sex, this is called sex, and it's a loving way for two people to show their love to each other, or they get, to a man and a woman fit together like a puzzle piece, something like that. All of that's kind of up to you, but they should have the basic ideas around ages 5 and 6 about what happens in order for a baby to grow inside a uterus. All right, ages 6 and 7. So kids at this age can have a basic understanding of sex and relationships. And so my recommendation is to start having that conversation. So you're moving up the rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, from physiological needs and safety needs to things like love and connection and intimacy. And a 6 and 7-year-old can absolutely understand this. So here's some conversation or some prompts that you may use as a platform or a suggestion to have your own conversation with your 6 or 7-year-old. God created male and female bodies to fit together like puzzle pieces when the penis and the vagina fit together. Sperm, and you can talk about them being kind of like tadpoles, swim through the penis and up and meet with the egg. And then, like we talked about before, sex can be one of the ways in which people show love for each other. So kind of the basic understanding of how sex happens, a 6 and 7-year-old can absolutely understand that. And you don't have to go farther than that if you don't want to. And if you do want to, that's okay too. Either way is fine. But at this age, a 6 and 7-year-old can definitely understand this kind of simple concept of sex and reproduction. All right, ages 8 and 9. So now we're getting into, the importance of sex. So your kiddo has probably gathered that sex has a high value. And what I mean by that is that they see sexual images in media portrayed on movies, even in things like Disney movies. There is sexual tension between the characters. So at this age, your kiddos understand that this thing has importance, and they may not understand why it has importance, but they understand that it does have importance. So it's important to take a hold and lead that conversation, because you don't necessarily want the media to lead that conversation for you. So she is probably understanding that sex is very important, but doesn't really understand why. And so at this age, most kids can understand or at least handle basic explanations about almost any topic because they're going to come across it in some way, shape, or form through media, usually. And that even includes things like, heavy topics like rape, can be talked about in a simple kind of basic manner. Sex is something for, people to enjoy as a way to love each other, but nobody should be forced into having sex with another person. That's not okay, and that's wrong. And maybe you don't want to talk about rape in using the term rape, but you can talk about how sex should be between, people who both want to be having sex. So, as a professional, I think ages 8 and 9 is an okay time to be talking about almost any of those topics, because they're going to get it. They're going to get it from school, peers or media. And so going back to the beginning of our masterclass today, the important part is that you carry the conversation, you lead the conversation, so that when she has questions about sex, she knows to come to you. Okay, you lead the conversation, you carry the conversation, and you be that trusted source for her, so that when she has questions, because she will, she comes to you or he comes to you. Okay. All right, ages 9 through 11. So, lots of our kiddos are going through puberty. This is a great opportunity to, talk about the changes that are going to be coming about through puberty. Now, some of these puberty changes, like hair and sweating and things like that at your period, you may have already approached with your son or daughter, because maybe they have watched you go to the bathroom and, said, "Mommy, why do you have hair on your vagina, or why do you have hair on your vulva?" And I don't, so that might be something that you have already talked about with them. And now at ages 9 to 11, it's a more common conversation you might be having, because they are actually living it. And it can be confusing, and it can be scary, and it can be overwhelming for some. So if those changes are happening, absolutely lead that conversation. Be the one that they go to for any of those questions they may have about the changes in their body. And you know what? It's a celebration. It's a celebration of them growing up. It's sometimes sad for us parents to see them going through this. At the same time, they're sprouting wings, they're getting independent, and these are the signs that our kiddos are growing up. So it's an exciting time, but it can be very alarming if they don't have the right information, or they don't know that these things are natural. A 9 to 11-year-old will see sex-related topics on the news or television, and absolutely be willing or be the one who prompts a discussion about those topics. Is it sex trafficking? Is it unconsensual sex? Is it even just body image things? Talk about the Dove ads with your daughter. Talk about, how not everybody looks like the girls on TV, and that's okay. And, TV isn't a representational sample of what we really look like as women, or men for that matter. Okay. So it's a great time to have those conversations. So our last age group is going to be age 12 and beyond. So at this point, your kids are formulating their own values about relationships and sex. They are thinking about it. They are, questioning how they feel about, people they're attracted to. They are creating their own values. So at this point at age 12, it's, to check in basically every so often to make sure you are providing, and again, leading that conversation, providing better context surrounding the information they are getting. That being said, overkill may get you tuned out a little bit, but I tend to say err on the side of being too open or too available for your kids. Be a little overkill may go a long way for you. So anyway, by age 12, your kids are formulating their own values about relationships and sex. And so at this point, you are kind of taking the check-in role, how can I help you understand this better? What questions do you have about what we just saw? I noticed that you are, seeing or dating, not dating, but going out with this girl, or you like this girl. Tell me about it. Tell me about your feelings for her. Tell me about how you think about him. Those types of check-ins are going to be what you're going to be doing at this age and beyond, through high school, through their college or beyond high school, whatever they're going to do. This is kind of the role that you're taking. But everything up until that point is preparing you for this role. It's basically preparing you to be the authority on sex, to be the one that they come to when they have questions about sex. So going back to the very beginning, this is why it's so important that you understand how you yourself, how you engage in a sexual conversation, how you feel about your own sex life. And I know that can be uncomfortable for us to kind of negotiate when we're thinking about, how does this even relate to my kid? But it does, because every conversation, every dialogue, every message that you send to your child is coming through your own filter and through your own thought process around sex. So, is there abuse in your past? Is there negative connotations about sex in your past? Are there things that you considered mistakes? Are there things that you considered wins? Do you want your child to have a sex life like yours? Do you want their sex life to be different? Do you want them to think about sex the way you do, or would you like it to be different? Establishing that at the very beginning, before you even have conversations to your kids about sex, can be very, very helpful, because it will guide the way in which you send messages about sex to your kids. And everybody's going to be different, and that's okay. The important part is, whatever the value is that you want to send, whatever the messages that you want to send, the important part is to understand how you feel about it, to make sure that you are the authority on sex, that they come to you for information, and that you are, sending something that is a value that you want them to have later on in life. What would be your ideal for your kid? What would be, if you were to know everything about their sex life, which you won't, but if you were to know everything about their sex life, what would that look like? That they, only engaged in sex at a certain time with, a certain number or single number of people, or that they were always in charge of their sex life, or that they had great body image and they were confident, because because confident kids are the ones that can say no. Remember that. Confident kids, the ones who have information and the ones that have the right amount of confidence, are the ones that are going to make great choices surrounding sex. And some of those great choices are going to be not having sex until they are ready. Okay, so I hope you've gotten some value out of this masterclass today. I hope you have learned a little bit about, when and what to say to your kids about sex. I hope that this has been valuable. If you want to learn more, if you want to really dig in deep and really have a great guide and a great path to talking to your kids about sex, and as a whole, raising a sexually healthy kid, I want to personally invite you to join my 4-week online course. It's launching on June 6th. I'm so excited about this course, because it's something that people have asked for a really long time. And I'm finally able to launch it this summer. And I want to get a great group of parents together to go through this course with me, and really dig in and ask ourselves those questions of how do I view my own sex life, and how is that affecting my child. I want to create a group of parents to go through this course and really change the course of the conversation that we're having with our kids. Really create a stable, reliable environment where we as parents can say, I am going to change the direction of the conversation about sex. You know, maybe your parents didn't talk to you about sex at all, and you want to change that for your kid. Or maybe you grew up with some very negative message full of shame and guilt, and you want to change that for your kid. I applaud you, and I want to help you. I want to be the one that you can say, listen, Celeste, I don't know, what I'm doing. I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but I want to try. I can help you with all of those things. And so I've created this course called How to Raise a Sexually Healthy Kid. It's going to start on June 6th. You can find more information about this course on my website, drcelesteholbrook.com. If you click on coaching and speaking, there's a place where you can learn more about this course. I want to personally invite you because I know because you've been in this masterclass, you signed up today and you took an hour of your very valuable time to talk about the subject. I know that you're interested. I know this could be a really great fit for you. So if you are interested, head on over to my website and check out How to Raise a Sexually Healthy Kid. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to email me at celesteholbrook@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have regarding raising a child. No, not any questions regarding raising a child. I don't know, I have all those answers. But I can help you with raising sexually healthy kids and having those tough conversations. I'm here to support you. I hope that you can find some of this information valuable and you can take back to your partner or those other parents that you are in the trenches with, and it gives you some ideas about how to go about doing this. Most of all, I want to encourage you because parenting is so hard and there's so much pressure to do the right things all the time. And you know what? You're not going to, and I'm not going to, but we are trying. And having those tough conversations and getting uncomfortable about talking about sex is one of the best things, in my opinion, that you can do to help your kid gain confidence in their own sexuality, in their own skin, in their own body image. And that's just such a beautiful thing that you can give to your kid. So if you're interested in more about this topic, you'd like to maybe join the class or think about joining the class, head on over to drcelesteholbrook.com and you can click on coaching and speaking. And that's where you will find information about this online course. It will be 4 weeks long. Every Monday, I'll send you a video similar to the one that you just watched, as well as homework, writing prompts, and exercises to do throughout the week to help build basically a map for you to have those healthy conversations with your kid as he or she grows. So every Monday you'll get the video, you'll get homework, and then the other piece of the course is that we have a private Facebook group just for parents to have those conversations about where you're struggling with talking to your kids about sex and sexuality and intimacy and love and relationships and all those really, really hard topics. I want to create a safe space for you to do that. So I've created a private Facebook group. When you join the course, you will be part of the private Facebook group. And throughout the week, we'll just have some conversations. I'll throw out some prompts, like for example, one of the first prompts will be, what did your parents tell you about sex? And this is a great way to kind of open that conversation about, what was your experience growing up with sex and how do you want to emulate that? And how do you want to be different with your kids? So that private Facebook group is basically a platform for helping us establish a safe space to support each other in raising our kids and support each other and say, I'm struggling here. My 4-year-old asked me or walked in on us having sex. That's a really common one. What do I do? So I'll be there. I'll be there to support you in that Facebook group. And, you'll have all these other parents who are going through the same exact things that you are. And it's time that we stuck together and we formed a safe space for us as parents to kind of have those conversations. So I hope to see you over there. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, celesteholbrook@gmail.com, or head over to my website, drcelesteholbrook.com. You can click on coaching and speaking, and that's where you'll find more information about this online course. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited about this topic. I hope you learned some valuable things, and I can't wait to see you online or over in our course. So hope you have a great week, and we will chat soon.